Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Strategy and Resources Committee on the 10th November 2022. For those of you who don't know, my name is Councillor Sue White, and I am the chairman of this committee. Members, we're streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you're giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak. I'll then invite you at the appropriate time. Please note that YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of the microphones. Therefore, if I can ask you when invited to speak, you remember to turn on your microphone and turn it off when finished. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers and keep your contributions as clear and as concise as possible. And I will apologise for wearing a mask, but I recently just tested negative for COVID, but I thought I didn't really want to breathe on anybody while I was here. Right, so moving on, agenda item 2, we've got apologies for absence, and I've got Councillor Bassinger and Councillor Durham, who has got a substitute for Councillor Fleming. Councillor Fleming, welcome to this committee. And do we have any others? Nope, they're the only two.
Chairman, that's it. Everyone else is here.
Thank you, Tara. Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, we've got minutes of the last meeting to be found on pages 5 to 30. Which is to consider the minutes of the Strategy and Resources Committee held on the 6th of October 2022. Does anybody have any queries, or can we agree them on block? Agreed. Perfect. Well done. Okay, moving on to agenda item 4, to disclose the interest and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they're also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. So do I have any interests? Councillor Channer?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's going to be a bit difficult to describe this fully because it relates to one of the items which won't be will have to be discussed in private and confidential. How it does relate to agenda item number 22, and it relates to one of the appendices, and should a discussion ensue on a certain specific element of one of those appendices, then I've decided, looking at it, I feel much happier. It's a non-registrable interest, I believe, having read all this bump and getting confused, but I've decided I will actually leave the chamber should on that particular, and I will declare my interest now that I'm a member of a charity which used to be called National Association of Crohn's and Colitis. It is now called Crohn's and Colitis UK. It's relating to that. I'm a member of that, and I also will disclose, but not the detail of it, due to other things. I have a protected characteristic. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. Do I have any other interests? No. Okay, moving on. Right, agenda 5, public participation, to receive the views of members of the public of which prior notification in writing has been received. Do we have any public speakers tonight?
No, Chairman, we have none. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Okay, moving on to agenda item 6, budgetary control as at the 30th of September 2022 on pages 31 to 38. And if we could have Mr. Leslie give this report for us, please. Over to you.
On the 6th of October, the committee received an update on the budget forecast for this year. I will outline the key budget points and key changes from the previous report as well. The approved in-year supplementary estimates of £229,000 remain the same as previously reported. Taking the budgeted use of the General Fund Reserve at the start of the year, the approved total budgeted drawdown from the reserve now stands at £681,000. The largest budget variance is around staffing, with a £272,000 variance due to the higher than budgeted pay award of 5.25% on average. Leisure contract income is also lower than estimated as costs increase and income remains below pre-COVID levels. Since the previous report, the level of investment income has been revised upward due to an increase in interest rates, and an additional £104,000 more than budgeted is now expected. Additional income in recycling and local tax collection is also expected. Overall, The forecast shows a variance in excess of the budget of £138,000. That's 1% of the net service expenditure budget. The forecast use of the general fund would now take the reserves from 5.8 million to just below 5 million, still above the recommended minimum of 2.6 million.
Okay, now, members, I will say that if we could keep our questions quiet, if you've got anything you'd like to mention, because we've got a really long agenda. And the recommendation is that the committee notes the forecasted 2020 to 2023 financial position as at the 30th of September this financial year. But before we put that to the vote, has anybody any questions they'd like to ask? Councillor Siddle?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would just like to thank the finance team for the good reports that come forward to the committee now. I think it's really important that we support our staff and we give them decent pay rises, and we try wherever possible to match inflation, because we need to support our hard-working staff through the cost of living crisis as much as anybody else. The other question that I have is, in terms of the leisure, are we working with the leisure provider in terms of trying to recruit more membership for the leisure facilities in the district?
Mr. Leslie?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the leisure contract, we have a leisure contract working group which meets. We've recently had figures through from our leisure contractor, and speaking with our consultant, we're actually seeing that the recovery rate is in line, if not above, and I think the contractor said it was actually above where the rest of the market tends to sit. So in terms of the overall recovery, in comparison, they have been performing quite well, albeit that overall the leisure industry is not recovering to pre-COVID levels as quickly as one might hope. We're also looking to give the working group a bit of an update on actually the activities that they are doing as well around that, and that will obviously be coming forward to the working group as well.
Any other questions? No, do we agree to note this report? Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 7, which is the medium-term financial strategy 23-24 to 2025-2026 on pages 39 to 46. So, Mr. Leslie, it's your night tonight, so over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The medium-term financial strategy approved in February had a gap for the next financial year of £1.3 million. Due to historically high levels of inflation, this was forecast to increase. Table 2 on page 41 details some of the inflation assumptions, and the total inflationary cost is in Table 1 on page 40. The largest contributing factors to the inflationary figure are staff costs and the waste contract, which are the council's two biggest areas of expenditure, with the waste contract linked to inflation. Staff inflation accounts for around half the inflationary figure next year, as an additional 5% pay award is forecast. I have to say that is provisional based on current estimates, and we also have the additional 2.75 budgeted shortfall from this financial year as well, which we need to catch up for with the budget in next year. There is also the incremental pay increases in pay points and a 1% increase in pension contributions that are required by the pension fund now as well. However, due to the Council's pension fund deficit contribution and investment income increases as a result of interest rates, the forecast deficit for the next year has in fact reduced to under £900,000. An estimated pension fund deficit contribution of £1.6 million was expected to be paid next year based on the last payment, but following the tri-annual valuation, a contribution of £351,000 will actually now be required. Paragraph 7.1.1 on page 42 does provide further details around the pension fund deficit. It's important to note that the forecast is based on a do-nothing scenario, and it does not take into account of any savings, increases to fees and charges, or new commercial income, which would have a cumulative effect over the years. There still remains a high level of uncertainty, including the local government finance settlement, which is due to be announced in December. Page 7 on page 40 provides further information around the areas of uncertainty.
Thank you. Now we've got 2 recommendations to agree the reports, but do members have any questions beforehand? Councillor Stamp?
Not so much questions, Madam Chair, but I'd like to ask all the directors, because I take on board what Councillor Siddle's just said about looking after our staff. Are we now assured that the staffing levels and the structure are in the right place? Has it been re-evaluated since the transformation? The transformation was mentioned the other day, about the possible, whether it was successful to the savings as what we were hoping as a council. And I'm sure the directors are and have got some suggestions, but sometimes councils like what we've got can be top heavy and light on the actual workers and the people who deliver the services. So can I have reassurance from the directors and their managers underneath or whatever, that they are doing their best and we are looking after our staff and we are actually constant reviewing our services? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr Holmes?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can give you some reassurance, members, this evening. So you recall back in September, Council looked at a report on service delivery itself and the structure in service delivery. So that is very much around the managers and directors looking at the service provision and looking to see whether the teams are structured correctly, whether we do have the right resources in place. So that work members approved for service delivery, but also said we bring back a report later this year on planning, and that will obviously do a similar thing. And we are right now looking at the structure, pay levels, everything that's connected to the staff effectively, and how we want to see that potentially structured to make that a really successful service. So that work is ongoing at this very moment, and a report will be coming back to council by the end of the year.
Any other questions, or can we note and agree these reports? All agreed? Thank you, members. Okay, moving on to agenda item 8, which is discretionary fees and charges 23-24 on pages 47 to 72, and that's Mr Leslie again.
The council applies an inflationary rate to its fees and charges based on August's RPI figure. Last year it was 3.2%, and this year, however, it is standing at 12.3%. That rate has been applied to the 23-24 charges shown in Appendix A where applicable. The inflationary pressures facing the council have been highlighted in the previous report. Given the high levels of inflation, Appendix C models the estimated impact of income by varying the percentage increase, so members can see the impact of that. Appendix B summarises the fees and charges that are due to change. It is noted that the council agreed to keep the discount relating to the wolfage, so this will remain, but inflation is proposed to be applied. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, members. Okay, Councillor Lagan and Councillor Stamp. Okay, Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. Madam Chair, 3.5, the promenade car park parking policy is to aim for overall maximum cost recovery of the entire park. Is this, and it says that a report's going to come to Council or SNR shortly, is this going to include a total revamp and a re-look at the whole thing? I mean, I think there were some discussions about some sort of cameras coming in to play most probably at a later date. And is it going to coincide with the much awaited, promenade plan? Promenade Park Management Plan, because I'm really concerned that we're going to look at things in piecemeal again rather than look at the whole thing. And you know, I can't remember when it was due to come. Was it 2012 or when it started?
2016.
2016 project. So, I mean, I think we do need to actually start to move some of these things forward, because I don't want it to be just, let's look at the review of the promenade parking. There's parking everywhere. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mrs Green.
Thank you, members. The intention is to, in the sort of first half of next year, to look at car park and a full car parking strategy, not just for the Prom Park, but actually across all of the car parks. So that will look at sort of proposals for increases. It will include consultation, and it will look at sort of some things like whether or not those car parks should be designated as a short stay, long stay, provision of free car parking spaces. So it will cover the whole sort of gambit of options for the car parks. So the intention is to bring that to that work to be carried out in the first half of the new year, and that will be used to help inform a mid-year review of the car parking.
Okay, thank you. No, we got Councillor Lagan. Do you want to ask a question next, and then I'll go to Councillor Fleming?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Stans raised a very good point, and thanks, Ms Green, for clarifying that. But it should form part of the Promenade Park Management Plan strategy when it comes together. Mine was just a query on page number 60 of the Appendix A. When the council met on the 3rd of November. We did talk about fees and charges on wharfage. I watched the tape back again today to make sure that I wasn't going mad. And what council actually resolved that it will go up by 10% and the rate of inflation thereafter. And that's been 2022-23. That's been applied as the calculation I've done makes the same. But you can't agree 23-24 because we don't know what that figure is going to be yet. So that's going directly against the resolution of council on the 3rd. So I just want that noted and that amended.
Thank you. Just noted. Okay, we'll note that. Thank you.
And also that be amended from this needs to be admitted for when we vote on whether we accept these fees and charges or not.
Yeah, I'll get the directors to look into that after the meeting because obviously I can't say now. Thank you.
You can.
Sorry?
You can, with due respect. You can admit 23-24 because you don't know what the rate of inflation is going to be in there, which was against the resolution of council on the 3rd.
Did not just say the inflation on there?
We can't say in advance.
That's what I thought, yeah. Mr. Lizzie?
Okay, thank you. What we do with the fees and charges is obviously set the rates for the next year based on a inflationary figure that we know at the time. So obviously we don't know what the inflation will be for the following year, and we obviously won't know until we're into the following year. So in order to set the rates for inflation before the 1st of April, we have to use a figure that we know. So historically we've used the August RPI figure to do that. So we need to set the fees and charges by the 1st of April. So that's how we do that, is use a point in time where we know the inflationary figure, because obviously we won't know what inflation was until we get to the end of that financial year, which obviously will be too late by that time.
Does that answer your question?
It gives me a methodology but doesn't give me the clarity that I'm after. Because fees and charges, basically, we could go, I'm not going to do this tonight because this is not the environment and the place to do it. But I'd like to look in the detailed calculus of how every fee and charge in everything that the council does is calculated and benchmarked. And I'm concerned that if we place something in here and this goes to council and it gets agreed, then that is the charge. We need to be really clear on this and caveat and say, because council did make that resolution on the 3rd of November, specific to this one item. Well, sorry, I apologise, 2 items with car parking as well. So while I accept the explanation from the Director of Resources, it needs to be very clear and minuted that inflationary increase will be applied at the time when we set again.
Yeah, exactly. That's something that we can't do in this committee. That's what I meant by saying that. But that's something that I'm sure you'll bring up at full council as well. Yeah. Right. Thank you, Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to the car park strategy. Can I just ask, Ms Green, is that going to be an in-house exercise or are we bringing in consultants? Thank you.
It's likely we'll bring in some additional help because it's a big piece of work for officers to do, but officers will certainly lead that review and there will be engagement with members, businesses and the public.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come back.
Councillor Siddle.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And then Councillor Channer. Councillor Siddle.
Sorry, can I just come back?
Yes, Councillor Flynn.
Yeah. So can I just ask when that will start then? And have you already sort of scoped out a company to do this? How far along the line are you? Thank you.
No, it hasn't been scoped as yet.
Right, so we've got Councillor Siddle, Councillor Channer, and then Councillor Fluke. All right, Councillor Siddle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So in terms of the inflationary increase, what figure are we going for? What was it in August? And is that what we're going for in terms of these increases?
Yeah, to be very clear, the RPI figure in August was 12.3%. That figure has been applied to the fees and charges in Appendix A, as previously stated, but I think it's worth flagging that as it stands, the inflation figure used is 12.3%, and that is currently the figure that would be approved. In Appendix C, there are various rates to allow members to compare the difference in income that different rates would apply to. So that's information Appendix C, which is deemed to help decision making.
Thank you. Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'm going to go back to the car parking, I'm afraid. And again, it is if the inflationary rate is applied. Mr. Leslie's just explained that, and I have obviously read Appendix C, and I can see the changes when you see the varying sort of application of degrees of the inflation rate, which I think are referred to at council. There'd be a table showing members the differences that could be applied. I know it's a stupid question because we largely do it with cards now, but will that result in the car park charges actually being rounded up the right way? We won't have any like 5p's coming into the equation. Because I know when I mentioned this before, I was told that the reason we couldn't do something because it could make it difficult to our machines, but obviously now it's much more applied for by cards. That might alleviate that, but it's always better if you have round figures, I think. So I asked that question. Also regarding the questions on the car parking strategy and everything, we did actually have at one time, and I have asked this question before, and my understanding was it could be reconvened. We had a car parking task and finish working group, and that was made up of members, and it was members who became involved in matters like this. So I would very much hope regarding the member engagement, I heard it was going to be largely officer-led, and then there'd be consultation with members and businesses and what have you. I would have thought that we need to reinvigorate that car parking task and finish working group, or whatever it was called, because I think that's quite important to have members actually involved in the formulation of any strategy going forward for the longer term, Madam Chairman. And if I please may ask on the pre-application process, I have looked at Appendix C and I'm aware of the fees and charges. Can you assure me that under 12.3%, should that be applied, that will give full cost recovery, bearing in mind the pay increases coming regarding our officers, that will result in full cost recovery for pre-applications, taking officer resource time, and not be sort of supplemented by any taxpayer money coming from another budget. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. Right, Mr. Holmes, I think is going to answer some of the questions.
Yes, thank you. On car parking, Chairman. So yes, I agree. I think it would be helpful to reconvene the working group with members. We've done that in the past when we've looked at fees and charges, and I think that will be a very sensible thing to do. So we will be looking to involve a consultancy for this piece of work to support us, because obviously the strategy will not just look at the fees and charges, it will look at where the car parks are, type of use for the car parks, have we got enough car parking, so a proper sort of review of our parking provision. So that's the intention, and I think the working group will be reconvened to do that, and obviously that will then send its report back.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Holmes. And then with Mr. Leslie for the...
I think Mrs. Wheatley.
Oh, is it Mrs. Wheatley? I do. Oh, she's online. Oh, Mrs. Wheatley, could you come and help answer the question on the other ones that were raised by Councillor Channer, please?
Yes, sorry, Chair. Would you mind just repeating the question? Thank you.
Okay, right. My question was, obviously I'm looking at Appendix C and I'm aware of the other documents, but I'm specifically homing in on Appendix C and hearing Mr. Leslie say that currently it is intended the 12.3% August inflation rate be applied to our fees and charges. My interest is in pre-application process and the charges. Obviously, that involves officer time regarding pre-application meetings. Now, I know currently we're only dealing with certain elements in terms of pre-application, but what I want assurances of is that application of that increase does in fact cover total cost recovery for the time of our officers in the times that they give resource-wise to pre-application inquiries and meetings, etc. Because with staff incremental rises, and that's lovely, our staff getting an increase but, on their pay, which is right, bearing in mind, as Councillor Siddle referred to. However, I want to know that we will make sure we have total cost recovery and we're not actually having a supplement coming from the general taxpayers. It should be perhaps those developers that meet that charge. Thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you, Councillor Channer. Yes, so we do recalculate officer costs in terms of the effort that is spent on providing these services. We haven't accounted for this financial year's increase because that was only confirmed just recently, but we will review it again. We tend to review it every couple of years to make sure that we are adjusting it up or down depending on the amount of effort and time that goes into providing that service. So it doesn't incorporate the increase for this financial year, but it's an exercise that we will do for next financial year, and we will adjust those fees if we need to.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wheatley. I think Mr. Leslie wants to come back, and then if he doesn't answer your question, I'll let you come back again.
I suspect he might know where I'm coming from, so I'll let him answer.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's worth pointing out that obviously we didn't know about the confirmed pay increases, but in terms of the actual RPI increase of 12.3% that's being proposed, matched against obviously the pay award, the backdated pay award and the other inflationary pressures around staffing, which I talked about, the 12.3% should cover that. We're very confident that actually if you add up the percentage increase in staff, the 12.3% would cover that side. And as Mrs. Wheatley has said, we'll do a recalculation of those just to check that that is the case later on. But 12.3% is obviously a sufficient chunk of inflationary increase that should cover the pressures, but we appreciate that work is still to be done and to be confirmed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That gives me some assurances. Of course, if we also had, bearing in mind, we started from a case where we were doing total cost recovery, and I'm not totally sure that we have, but hopefully we are. I'll take on board what Mr. Leslie says, but I think that is my fundamental wish, that obviously we ensure that we do have total cost recovery.
Absolutely.
And would that include overheads?
Yeah, on the basis that the current figure includes those overheads, that would obviously increase the charge for the overheads in that increase as well. So the overall sum would increase by 12.3%. But in terms of the overheads, I think I would probably just have clarification from Mrs. Wheatley that that does include relevant overheads as well. But that's something that we picked up as part of the review too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Wheatley?
Yes, sorry. Just yes, it would include all overheads. We do include what we class as backpack costs, which relate to the associated utilities and all of the associated costs there. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Fluker and then Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just, bear in mind that we are providing free overnight parking in the car park outside. Can Miss Green assure me that maybe we will bring forward a policy for that car park sooner than the others? There's even bits on social media now from various tradespeople who are saying it's a great place to leave your van. It's protected by CCTV. The parking's free, and it seems to be free all day as well. At the end of the day, we've got to pay to resurface that car park and replace the equipment. So, can you assure us that you're going to bring that forward separately, given the amount of usage it's currently having, and tonight is no exception?
Actually, before we go to Mrs. Green, I thought we'd raise this at the last meeting, so it'd be interesting to have an update now this evening. So, Mrs. Green? Yeah.
So a couple of things, members. So during COVID, there was a relaxation of the use of the car park, particularly as it was used for the vaccination centre. However, now we have returned it back to full use. The car park is now being used on a permit basis by staff, so we are starting to do enforcement work to ensure that the car park is only occupied by either people that have paid or where there is a permit to use it. And that's permits for staff and partners that are authorised to use our car park.
Okay, so if you let me come back, Chairman, perhaps after the meeting, Ms Green, you could circulate the enforcement information, so how many tickets we've issued and what we've recovered over the last 3 months. I think that would be useful to see that we're actually dealing with this properly, because I suspect it's the same vans that are there all the time. Maybe they're paying a fixed penalty ticket every day because it's cheaper to do that. But clearly something isn't quite right here, and I appreciate that you are looking at it though. Thank you.
And Ms, on the second part to the question is we are currently looking at a formal new car parking arrangement and offering permits to purchase for members of the public and for businesses. So we're actively working on that at the moment.
I'm delighted that you took up my offer. Thank you.
Okay,
Madam Chair, I can't remember which paper it is in. I know I've read that in one of these papers about this car parking and the car park being used.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Stamp?
As a quick one, Madam Chair, who is on the car parking group? Because I don't remember it being on the... Yeah, that's right. So who's going to be on it? Or will you send a thing around, please?
I believe it was, I'm not sure it was done at the last, so it had to be done, I believe, because it went into sort of hibernation.
Okay, Mr Dodson?
Well, I believe it's a task and finish group, which by its nature is appointed to undertake the task in hand until it's finished. So it's only appointed on a sort of interim basis. But I think it's an appointment of council. So a paper will go to council for the group to be appointed.
Sorry, if you let me come back. I mean, does it have to be appointed by council? Because I'm just thinking it's going to report back to this group, isn't it? This group's going to report to council. I think it just sort of speed things up because it would normally come to this council.
Actually, yeah, well, while we're discussing
I'm thinking we could just do it tonight.
Yeah, Councillor Fleming was also relating to the same question.
I actually think that it should be reporting to council because obviously Councillor Mays is the SEP rep, so she would need to be on it, in my view. I'd also like to be on it as the county member. My inbox is, I get many complaints about parking issues in the town.
I can come back.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr Dodson?
I do feel it's a matter for the groups as well to have a consideration, quite frankly, on that's normally, I know they're not politically balanced, but normally there's some discussion.
So shall we leave this to full council then, as it's meant to be, I think.
I just
have a discussion.
Just wanted to say, I think the previous group was made up of members from different committees rather than a single committee, which is why it would have been appointed by council. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think we need to make sure we get on the next agenda at full council because it is important that we get this going, because if we can be claiming in for enforcement, we should be doing it. Okay, right, members. Oh God, my iPad's gone to sleep now. I think there were two recommendations. Little one, the detailed fees and charges set out in Appendix A be agreed, and little two, that the inflation rate to apply to specific fees and charges as set out in Appendix C be agreed. Members, are you all in agreement?
Well, it's to full council.
Yes, but we're agreeing it in this committee, yes, to the council. That's our recommendation to the council, yes. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, moving on to agenda item 9, which is the 23-24 capital project bids on pages 73 to 96, and it's Mr Leslie again.
Right, well, Table 1 on page 73 shows the 6 new projects that are proposed for approval. Appendix A provides the detail around those. The 2 projects relating to Riverside Park have had Section 106 contributions identified to fund these, with the remaining bids to be funded from Capital Receipts Reserve. Happy for any questions.
Okay, are there any questions, members? Lots of them. Councillor Swain, Councillor Stamp. So Councillor Swain first.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd always understood that the total revamp of the Century Garden and so on in Prom Park had 106 funding set aside for it.
Who would that be? Mr. Holmes?
Thank you, Chairman. You're absolutely right. There is 106 funding available for part of the project, but this is a very large project in terms of replacing all the play equipment and landscaping as well. So this is to fund the top up that budget effectively to give us enough to cover the whole project itself. But the 106 money is also available and will be used in connection with the project.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stamp?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be clear, is the figures that we've got written down here the figure that's coming out of our capital budget, or it's a mixture of both? And if it's a mixture of both, how much is coming from 106 and how much is coming out from the council? The second point, Madam Chair, is I think you're really lucky having the sensory garden being replaced and the things, because some of us don't even have one, and we don't even have any send swings or trampolines or anything in their district. I can't speak for Councillor Fluker. I don't know if he's got any in his parks, but I know in Burnham on Crouch we don't have a trampoline, we don't have a swing to cater for our SEND pupils, and I think we've actually been quite exclusive rather than inclusive, Madam Chair. So whilst I note the repairs on the, and grateful for the ones, because I'm always grateful for anything to come to Burnham on Crouch nowadays, is I think we also had to look at spending some of that 106 money, and we've got plenty, because we've had loads of houses built where I am. I think we ought to be looking at expanding it. So instead of just replacing, Madam Chair, I've got to find the page, if you forgive me, the one with the, Mr Holmes might be able to, oh, there we go, page 91, the 45,000 and the ones with the big, what are they called? Great big wooden blooming tyre things where you swing and whatever you do on them. Can we actually think about maybe changing that and incorporating some things for other people that we don't cater for in our district? Or is it too late, please? Thank you, Mr Holmes. I'll aim that one at you.
I don't believe it's too late at all, Chair, for us to be able to review that. And obviously the 106 funding is available as a lump sum. Normally what would happen is we would look at the designs, we would go out to tender, invite proposals. So I think it'd be helpful for us to have a separate discussion around this, so that when we actually get to look at that 106 money, it's how it will be spent. But yes, so not too late.
Brilliant. So could that be noted in the minutes that Mr Holmes is going to have a meeting with me about that specific project, please?
And the chairman, I think, will be there during that meeting. So yes.
Thank you. I am being a bit flippant, but it really is important.
I mean, that's open to all members. If all members have any items they'd wish to raise for Section 106 funding going forward, we've only got a finite budget. But obviously, it is there, and I think everybody should get an equal opportunity to apply for it. Councillor Fluker, and then Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, when you look at this, you think, well, there's a huge amount of money going into Maldon town. There's nothing really going into Burnham or indeed Southminster. Now, we have two parks in Southminster that are owned by Maldon District Council, and I know that Mr Holmes is working very closely with myself to try and arrange a meeting with the officers from Maldon District Council to see how we can deal with those parks, because at the moment they're basically maintained by volunteers. Now, it may well be that those volunteers at some time walk away, which means they're going to be a cost implication to this council. But this council financially is in a very difficult position. It doesn't matter how you dress it up. And when I look at things like the replacement of the galleon, the galleon is a great thing. It's iconic. I suspect it's not as iconic as the Thames barges, but nevertheless, it's something that, people in the Pond Park have got used to. But it's not something that we've had forever. And I just find it really, really hard to look at that and say, to see that we're going to spend £220,000 worth of taxpayers' money on what's ostensibly a toy, which I know that families in Southminster can't access because they cannot afford to get to Burnham. So, maybe we should spread the love and not spend all that money in Maldon and perhaps spend some of that money in some of the other areas. And for those of you that would have read the planning application that went to South East Area Planning last night, it was identified by this council that Southminster is one of the most deprived. You knew I was going to get it around the wrong way. One of the most deprived areas, not in the district, but in Essex. And I was absolutely staggered to read statistic last night. I think that's really, really hard, and it's not something. I'm sorry. I know we've got a health and safety issue bubbling along in the background, but it's certainly not something that I would support, spending all that money on one particular item, which isn't really available to the whole district. And whilst I've got your attention, Mr. Leslie, as far as these white van replacements, it's extraordinary some of the deals that are available now on lease. Particularly with sort of pickup trucks and everything else, and one looks at returns of money against, the capital loss of the asset. You can get these vehicles now. You can get a Ford Transit 350 pickup for about £400 a month now on a maintenance package. So I hope that you'll look at those. I appreciate we need the vehicles replacing because they're very old, looking at those. But I just hope you've done the due diligence around leasing. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Councillor. And firstly, I'll go to Mr. Holmes and then Mr. Leslie.
Thank you, Chairman. So with regard to play equipment, so essentially you're right, at Promenade Park, we're very fortunate in receiving a government grant back in 2004 for Promenade Park and Riverside Park. And so both of those play sites effectively date from that time. So officers maintain those play sites and have done ever since the day where they were installed, with a fairly strict regime in terms of they're either fit for purpose or they're closed. And we don't compromise at all on those. What the officers are saying now is that particular play site down in Prom Park, which is the Galleon, which is heavily used, a very popular facility with our visitors, and where they're coming from obviously it's not just the district but coming out of district. So it is an attraction in itself, heavily used all the year round. There really isn't a compromise in terms of repairs are getting so expensive now. We're spending tens of thousands of pounds replacing panels, having to inspect it more frequently because we want to make sure it's safe. So I'm afraid it's all or nothing. If we didn't fund this, we would have to simply remove it. Now, you could put a cheaper piece of play equipment in there, but I would obviously be concerned at that because has always been a very high-profile, dominant piece of equipment and very popular with our visitors. But I appreciate it's a very expensive piece of equipment too. So all of these are not effectively upgrades or improvements. They relate to end of life. And I think that the choices are fairly stark. If we don't maintain them and can't maintain them, we should simply remove them. And that's for the safety reason, and nothing else.
Okay. Right, Mr. Leslie, did you have a question there? I think we did, didn't we?
The question was about considering the best options for purchasing the vehicles. So yes, that would be part of the consideration that we'll undertake. I think we also include that consideration around the climate strategy as well, and green vehicles in that, and if there are any suitable alternatives, so that we do consider a couple of aspects around that.
Okay, and Mrs. Button's mentioning about we're also looking into green options for the vans as well, so I'll speak for her there. Right, as we've got a really long agenda, I will go round. I've got Councillor Stamp, Councillor Channer, Councillor Siddle, but first we've got Councillor Swain, followed by Councillor Shaughnessy. So, Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I obviously must defend the Galleon. As Mr. Holmes says, it is a crucial part and attraction in the Promenade Park. I would certainly welcome seeing some project come forward for Southminster for consideration. Taken overall, I wonder for council purposes whether we could have some figure for what Section 106 money plus potential grants could be applied against the total of these items of play equipment throughout the district.
Okay, would it be Mr. Holmes?
I'd have to come back to members on the 106 allocations, because as far as I understand, they are identified sometimes years in advance. And so I don't think you're able to switch around. So for instance, you couldn't take 106 funding and say, let's spend it on the Galleon instead. But we could do some analysis in terms of what money is identified per site and set that out. So I think that's probably the most straightforward thing to do. So you can see, a bit like we've identified at Burnham on Crouch, where 106 money was identified and could be applied on one of our sites. So I think where that is in existence, we can certainly highlight that. As for grant funding, it is possible to apply for grants from time to time when they come up. I would just obviously again highlight the fact that we believe these particular bits of kit are coming rapidly towards the end of life, and it could take some time and no guarantee of success to get funding. In the meantime, we've got to keep them safe and operating. So that would be my only caution around that.
Okay, thank you. Right, moving on to Councillor Shaughnessy, who hasn't spoken yet. So over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There is another playground that needs an awful lot of work, and that's the West Maldon Community play site, which is really almost falling apart in places. We do have some 106 money allocated, and Mr. Holmes is very aware of this, and he's also aware that every time I see him, almost, I mention it just so that he doesn't forget. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Thompson. You don't want to speak. I thought you wanted to speak when you. Okay, right. So, Councillor Siddle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it's important that we investigate where we can use Section 106 money, and I'm sure Leander would be on the scale would be good at doing that. Yeah, the Prom Park is our major attraction in terms of the district, and it's what people come to the district for or know the district about. I can really understand that we do need to spread it across the whole of the district, and we don't do enough of that at the moment. My big concern, though, is 3.7, where it says that we haven't really got any sizable capital receipts, and our capital reserves now are diminishing. So my question is, when was the last time this council put money into the capital reserves? When was the last time that we put a sizable amount of money to replenish this?
Mr. Leslie?
Yes, thank you. So the capital receipts reserve is replenished when an asset is sold. So basically it ensures that capital money is ring-fenced. So it will require a sale of a capital asset. I believe that the sizable amount was built up due to the housing stock from that time, and that was obviously the large receipt that went in there. So it's been several years since a sizable chunk went in there, and that's absolutely right. That it will only be replenished when that sale of an asset takes place. So once there is a depletion in that capital reserve, funding for capital will then move to being a revenue implication, and that's where the budgeting in terms of the future capital programme and the medium-term financial strategy will come increasingly important around that.
Okay, Councillor Siddle.
So the last time really this council, and this to me is a neglect of the way that this council has been administered for a very long time, is the fact that really the last time we put a large amount of money was when we sold council houses. And it's not, that is so short term. And one of the things that we should be doing, and we need to start doing as a council, is constantly building our reserves up whenever we can. And if we are looking to, we've got the galleon thing, which does need maintaining. We should be looking at how do we at times put money aside, like the Splash Park, we had to find money to do that, how we put money aside for when we are ready to maintain these things. And that has been neglected by this council and by previous administrations.
Well, I have to say we've been run by other administrations, so things could have been done when other administrations were in charge. That's just one thing I'll say. But right, moving on, I've got Councillor Channa next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we're all talking about the galleon, so I will, and Councillor Swain's raised the points. And I appreciate where Councillor Fluke is coming from, but the galleon, I mean, people come for a whole day here, and they do come, I know from speaking to people outside Suffolk, they come to our Prom Park, and I don't know them, I just happen to come to a conversation, and they use all the facilities, and they see it as, good value. If you erode perhaps some of the things in the Prom Park, then we may not get the level of visitor coming that we did have, and therefore car parking and all the other aspects of the kiosk could possibly suffer. So as much as I recognise it's a very large sum, I don't think we have any alternative, bearing in mind what I've read regarding the report and in terms of the existing galleon. So I think we need to do that, because I could see other issues coming our way if we're not careful. And Mr Holmes is right, the only other option would be probably total removal. Regarding 106 monies, I thought 106 monies had to be directly related to the development coming in the area of that development. We do not have SIL. Now, I know it's a bit different, maybe possibly with like the health services, but it's in that area like Burnham on Crouch, development coming there. Health says what they need in the area, like doctors' surgeries. But I do believe you can't necessarily build something in Maldon and then say 106s could supply something in Burnham or my ward. And like Councillor Fluke, I know it mentioned about Southminster, I've certainly got pockets of deprivation in my wards, my parishes that I cover. And it's my parish councils, I'm sure with every other member here, who actually do have, they've put in place sites and actually have equipment that they put in. And certainly through Essex, I think, I certainly did when I was the Essex County Council, I know Councillor Fleming has, through locality funding, we were able to help with some improvements there on projects regarding play sites. But perhaps this council needs to look at that maybe across the patch and see where perhaps play provision or other aspects need to be done. A strategy, I don't know if that could be done, but maybe we ought to have a real mapping exercise and see where our areas of deprivation and need are, and also population regarding young children, because some wards are more ageing than others. So I just put that on the table, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you. I will need to speak to colleagues in planning policy, but I do believe there is a review as part of the local plan that looks at play provision as well. So I will follow that up and we can respond to members of the committee on how that actually works. So yes, I think you're right. We have something that will look at it on a district level. I think perhaps my point, perhaps I didn't make it very well, where we have play sites installed and we need to maintain them, we're asking for funding because they are checked and inspected. It's not about, this report is not looking at new sites or putting sites in different places. In a way, that's a different discussion, because if you want to see more play provision across the district, then absolutely we could look at that. My point is, where we've got them already, we need to maintain them, and this is what this funding is asking you for.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Stamp. Actually, I'll let Councillor Stamp quickly,
Madam Chairman,
but we must start moving on to the long agenda.
That's my understanding. What I was saying is you can't put 106 monies for a play site in Maldon, that's coming from something in Maldon, and think you can do it to do up something over in Burnham or something, or supply something in Burnham. I was very well aware, I think, where Mr. Holmes was coming from.
Yeah, Mr. Holmes will raise that. Okay, Councillor Stamp next.
Chairman, thank you for allowing me to come back. It would have been better if we could have had two meetings instead of this one, because we're still going to be here at midnight, I feel, but there you go. What I'd like to say, though, and I am going to make the point, I find it quite ironic that the Galleon is going to cost 220 grand, to replace, and the Burnham pontoon has still not actually got its funding, which is going to be half the price, but yet we invested, how much was it, Councillor, still in the splash park? Can you remember? I can't. Last year. So come on, this is not, it's all right, Mr. Dodson or whoever going to try and shut me up. It's different that it always seems to go to Maldon and not Burnham on Crouch or somewhere else. Sorry if I apologise. I thought you was trying to stop me speaking, Mr. Dodson.
Okay.
Well, no, it isn't fair.
Avoid that one.
Thank you, Chairman. What I was going to say was that the money for the pontoon was included in the UK SPF funding bid that was put in, so that should allocate the funding, and we're working hard to ensure that we can bring that forward at the earliest opportunity within that.
Let's go back to be clear. That's hopefully it was agreed it was going to come out of reserves. Is it going to come out of reserves to bring it forward?
It was funding, wasn't it?
No.
Mr. Dawson?
In response to Councillor Stamp, you may remember the question was raised at the Corporate Projects Working Group, and I recently sent round an update in relation to that we had confirmation from the Department of Levelling Up Homes and Communities that we could spend from council reserves in advance and then claim back the money in the appropriate year for from UK Shared Prosperity Fund. We are still waiting for the outcome of the submission of that investment plan, unfortunately. So once we receive that confirmation, obviously we'll bring a relevant paper to committee to approve the use of those reserves in advance of receiving the allocation in the relevant year for UK Shared Prosperity Fund.
Okay.
It's not worth it. It's going to take me too long.
Okay, I will allow you to come back, but it needs to be really quick, because otherwise I'm going to draw this to a close. We've got about 2 minutes, so we've got Councillor Fluker and
Okay, very quickly then. So, I mean, I must admit, at this stage, we don't know whether we're going to get this funding or not. So I find it remiss that we haven't got the pontoon actually in one of these projects, because it's easier to take it out than put it in later when we go to council. The other thing is, Chairman, I'm just a bit concerned about what the recommendation is. You know, we're going to vote for these piecemeal as a recommendation. I beg your pardon, as a collective, not piecemeal. Again, Chairman, we spent 10 years raising money in Southminster to build a skate park, but it looks as though this council is going to spend £120,000 of taxpayers' money on completely refurbishing the skate park in Maldon, which again, the children in Maldon, children in Southminster can't get to.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fluker. Right, so I've got Councillor Fleming, but it has to be really short because I'm going to get really tough in a minute about closing this.
Thank you, Chair. I just, like Councillor Shaughnessy, I wanted to express my disappointment that the West Maldon Community Centre playground is not on this list. So I wanted an update of when that is due for refurbishment. And you reference 106 monies. Are they historic or are they linked to the current sites around Linebrook Way? Thank you.
Chairman, I believe they're historic amounts of money, and I believe West Maldon is like a forward plan. I don't think it was something like 23, 24 before that money was coming forward. But I think the simplest thing we need to do is to identify all those play sites and funding that's made available through 106s and circulate it to this committee, and hopefully that will give the answer. What I can assure you is we know that West Maldon is coming toward the end of life, but it is maintained. Had that money not been available through 106 and it needed a replacement, that's when you would have seen it on this. But I think knowing that there's 106 money coming, I think that's why it's not on the list, for no other reason. They have to be safe, they have to be maintained. So in one way or another, we will be coming back to members for funding at some point.
Okay, members. Councillor Channon, does your question relate to the agenda item? Because we're getting off.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Regarding the UK SPF money, my understanding is we get that. It's the levelling up bid where we put the bid in, but the Burnham pontoon is under the UK SPF, which we know we're getting, but it comes in tranches. Now, regarding Maldon's tranches, it's how they balance it going across, and you get the greater amount possibly a bit further in. And I think that's why you can use your reserves. You know you're going to be getting it. I think that's where Ms Cable's coming from. I hope that might be the case. So they're now saying, you know you're going to get the money, but if you want to spend something, and it might be greater than the sum total you've got in, let's say, the first tranche, then you can do, because you can know you're going to get something coming in year 2 or whatever. I think that's what the officer meant, I hope.
Point of clarity.
I will allow you to have your point of clarity.
Chairman, I'd just like to clarify with Mr Holmes that if we increase the car parking by additional 5%, would that pay for the galleon? Thank you. Apologies, Chairman, that was a bit hot.
Yes, I think, I don't think we need to answer that one. Yeah, well, I'm sure Mr Holmes will come back to you on that one. Right, okay, members, we've got a really long agenda, so the recommendations are the committee reviews the project bids set out in Appendix A in preparation to recommend a 23-24 capital programme at the Strategy and Resources Committee on January 23 for approval by the Council in 2023. So it's coming back before it goes to Council. I'm sorry, Mr Lagan, I'm not taking any more questions on this. Now, are we all in favour, all agreed, or not?
No, and thank you for not letting me speak. My hand was raised twice, you acknowledged me twice, and you've taken away, again, a democratic right to raise a point as a Maldon ward member. So I don't agree with this, no matter whatever, and I want that completely noted. I want it noted that I was not allowed to speak on the agenda item about a Maldon asset. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so would you like a recorded vote on that? Do I have a seconder?
Absolutely, thank you.
Do I have a seconder for a recorded vote? Yeah. Okay, right. Yeah, for all of them. Tara, could you organise a recorded vote, please?
Yes, members. So recorded vote is for the recommendation as just read out by the chairman. If you could indicate for or against or abstain, please, when I call your name. Starting with Councillor Fleming, please.
For.
Councillor Fluker.
Against.
Councillor Lagan.
Thank you. Against.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Against.
Councillor Siddle.
For.
Councillor Stamp.
Against.
Councillor Swain.
For.
Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For.
Councillor White.
For.
Councillor Channon. I think that's it. Councillor Channon, sorry. Yes, sorry, I missed Councillor Channon. Apologies about that.
Well, thank you. I'm not going to get involved in any service failure or anything like that so far. Thank you.
And
let me speak, I want to give you some detail about some of these. Yeah, but they're They've gone on a spending spree, haven't they?
Chairman, the results of that vote are 6 for, 4 against and no abstentions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, and Councillor, I can just say that I'm sorry that I didn't speak previously, but normally members do start waving their hand when we get close to
I did it
finishing
twice.
it.
My
So.
points are noted. I'm not going to take it any further.
Okay, right. Moving on. So we have agenda item 10, which is the rural settlements list. There was one query raised to me by a member, and that was why we have Northumbridge split into north and south. Why some of the districts are split north and south. Does anybody know why this is, Mr.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very historical list that's been around for a number of years, which we've been using to determine the rural settlements. My understanding is that it works with the planners to identify relevant settlements and where they perhaps could be split. So, although we don't have someone here from the operational knowledge of the side of it, but my understanding would be that that's been mapped out with the planning and they're notified as sort of separate settlements. But if that's something that the committee will be interested in, I'm happy to get someone who will be able to give sort of a detailed answer.
Councillor Fleming and then Councillor Fluker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leslie. I haven't sat on this committee for a couple of years now, so that's the first time I've seen North and South Fambridge. So I understand why we have the list. It's for rural rate relief. So I'm just puzzled as to why Fambridge population maybe 500 people tops is separated into two settlements. I don't understand that. The same for Althorn. I don't understand that. So I suppose my question is, does that influence planning policy in any way? Could I have your assurance that it doesn't?
No, this is purely for our rural settlement list and purely to help identify those rural businesses which can access rural rate relief.
Thank you.
Okay, and we've got Councillor Fluker and
Well, Chairman, Councillor Fleming's mentioned Hawthorne, and so I think it's only right and proper I mention my friend's ward, Great Totham, because that's north and south as well.
Yeah, as is North Fambridge.
Weird.
Yes, Councillor Siddle.
Well, I think it's really important that we do have this separation. Great Totham North and Great Totham South are although it's one parish, are very different entities. And Great Totham North is far more rural than Great Totham South. So I think it is important, from my point of view and my ward, that we keep this distinction.
Okay, members. Right, so do we all agree to approve this recommendation? Agreed. Okay, thank you, members. Okay, moving on to agenda item 11, which is the Maldon District Council Disabled Facilities Grant Policy in 2022 to 2025, which I have for Mr. Duguid.
Was it item 10?
11. We've just done 10. Sorry, is it Mrs. Wheatley?
Yes, it is. Thank you. So this report relates to the Disabled Facilities Grant Policy 2022 to 23, which outlines the approach of the Council's private sector housing officers in relation to the dispensation of the Better Care Fund for the purposes of delivering grants for disabled adaptations in the district. The Better Care Fund allocates monies for purpose of providing disabled facilities grants, also known as DFGs. For the financial year of 22-23, Maldon District Council was given £612,132 to fund grants associated with disabled facilities and adaptations. The Council is required to provide disabled facilities grants under the Housing Grants, Construction and Regeneration Act of 1996. The Act explicitly covers the provision of mandatory disabled facility grants upon receipt of an occupational therapist recommendation. The Maldon DFG policy seeks to set out the types of grant assistance available, up to a maximum of £30,000, the eligibility criteria for obtaining a grant, guidance on making grant applications, and the service standards to be expected. As such, the DFG policy seeks to formalise the processes involved in the dispensation of the Better Care Fund, in line with the Housing Grants, Construction and Regeneration Act 1996. Mr Portergood, our DFG specialist, is on hand this evening to answer any member questions. Thank you.
Okay, members? Okay, Councillor Stamp?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I was reading the paper, I actually just put at the top advertising because a lot of people most probably don't know about it, but I'm pleased to note I've just put it in the search engine for Maldon and it actually comes up, which is an absolute credit because sometimes you put things in there and nothing comes up. So I agree with it. Thank you. It's a good report.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Lagan?
Thank you for the noticing, Chair. I'm so pleased. It's a really good report. It's an excellent piece of work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agreed. So shall we agree the recommendation? Yeah, okay, well done, members. Okay, thank you. Right, agenda item 12, which is a supplementary estimate request on pages 119 to 122, which is Mr Holmes, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, yes, this report before you this evening asks for an additional sum of money to manage the council's tree stock. Background to this is that the council commissioned Essex County Council through its Place Services team to survey all of the council's trees on all of its land stocks, and they made a series of recommendations for tree improvement works over a period of time. Some of those works have been undertaken. 3.2 details the work commenced, and a sum of 14,500 was spent on the most urgent works, but there's still a considerable amount of work to do. This report sets out the works that would need to be done and the funding that would need to be to cover it. Now, we would use Place Services to give the expertise, but the actual works themselves would be carried out through a tender process, and suitable contractors would undertake the work. So there is a revenue budget each year for tree maintenance and following winter storms or any defects that appear with trees, but this effectively is a backlog, and when we need to clear this backlog to ensure that the tree stock is in a fit state going forward. It's regrettable that we need to ask for this sum of money, but unfortunately that represents where we are with the tree stock at this moment in time, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fluker and then Councillor Stamp.
Well, I think, Chairman, if you look at implications, Roman 4, I think it sums up exactly where we are financially. You know, I know we haven't had a tree officer for quite some time, but I'm absolutely staggered at some of the figures in here. And what I'd like to be assured by Mr Holmes is, through you, Chairman, is that throughout the district we have a lot of arboricultural companies, all of whom are properly qualified, and there has been a concern from some of them over how difficult it is to get onto the tender list to carry out works for this council. Even if you go through I think the Essex procurement hub, it's very, very difficult to do so. And my feeling is that we should, wherever possible, use them, and perhaps we should find a way of encourage them to register with the hub, or at least support them to do so. And this is something that comes from that industry sector quite a lot. I don't know how you're going to pay for this.
Okay, Mr Holmes.
Chairman, yes, I could speak to colleagues in our procurement team to see how easy it is for contractors to get onto that list, if there's any improvements we can make to that. And obviously, in talking to Place Services in terms of overseeing that process, we can express that view as well. So I'm sure we'll do everything we can to open the process so contractors can bid for this work itself. I think, as I said before, we have responsibilities as landowners. Tree stock is our tree stock. We do know what needs to be done to them. It is a matter of cost, unfortunately, and having the contractors out to undertake the work. So we will obviously look at the budget. We've asked Place Services to go back and review that assessment. If we can make a saving, obviously we will. I can't guarantee that, and I can't even guarantee that they won't say there's more work to do over the summer of this year, where obviously trees have been distressed because of drought conditions. But at the moment, this is our best estimate of the works, and this is where we're asking members for your support.
Sorry, can I come back?
You can if it's quick.
Nobody likes the nuclear option of dealing with trees, but we can't afford to maintain these going forward. And, you know, we need to make some big decisions here. And you know, giving huge amounts of money to Place Services when I believe we could have done this in-house with our own tree consultant. I mean, I don't know how many, I don't even know how many trees we're talking about. I suspect it's probably about 150, maybe it's in there somewhere. But, you know, I think we should do this on a piecemeal basis using local companies who are quite adequate to do this type of work.
Thank you, Ms Holmes. I have to say I do agree with those sentiments. We do have an awful lot of contractors who you would think would be cheaper, but...
Chairman, so to be clear, Place Services, £12,000 for them to oversee this work. So it's £100,000 for the actual works themselves, which would be subject to competitive tender. And I've heard what you said about trying to use local contractors. So this isn't paying Essex County Council Place Services the whole amount of money. This is to ask them to oversee the work and to supervise that work and us to get competitive prices for the work itself. So that's what I could report
So
back.
for clarity, Chairman, I think it is important then. So the £12,000 that we're paying Essex County Council Places Services includes not only the survey that they've already carried out, but also them supervising the work. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairman. That's my understanding. They would supervise that work under their expertise, the work carried out by contractors.
That will all be within the £12,000?
That is my understanding, Chairman. And for clarity, over 265 trees have been identified for work.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Stamp?
Mine's a really quick one. Thank you, Madam Chair. Burnham Town Council, we did ours a few years ago, actually, 3 years ago, because we're up to renewing it again. And we're a bit late at Maldon District to actually bringing this in line, so I actually welcome the work that's been done. I think it is a necessity. I totally agree with Councillor Fluker, though, that I'm sure we've tried to use local, because there's loads of them about you and you have to see them all over. I don't agree with him with chopping them down, though, Madam Chair, because it goes against everything that we're actually doing with our climate strategy. So I actually welcome the report and I thank it for that it's been done so comprehensively.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Channer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm a great supporter of trees, and I agree with Councillor Stamp. I mean, they're intrinsic to our environmental improvements, and I mean, the Queen wants everyone to plant a tree, and we know there's the Essex Forest Initiative and everything, and we're getting on board with that. What I would say, though, I do have can see where Councillor Fluker's coming from, because when I saw the figure of the number of trees, I did, for very good reasons, have to have 6 trees removed last year. And I know the cost that I paid in taking trees out. And then, of course, there's other works you might have to do, like prune back, which is totally much cheaper option, actually, than having a full-grown tree. So I worked out what my 6 trees cost, plus the pruning works. And actually, I had quite a significant amount left over from what's being quoted here. So I would just think what might be helpful with reports like this, if we get a bit of a detail, knowing what the works might be that are required. And I noticed there's also a contingency, so I'm being mindful that I think rather than ending at the 112k, we could see it actually being the 130k, as mentioned in a paragraph within the report. But trees are important to me, and if you cut trees down, in fact there's people hanging from hammocks now in trees for a particular oak tree that's got to be removed for development, not in our district. So they are, but I do think the cost does sound quite high, but it may be because we haven't got the detail of the works that will be applied. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and personally we've planted over 1,000 trees in the last 2 years. Right, Councillor Siddle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in terms of this, it seems like, again, it's one of these things that we've neglected, and all of a sudden we've got a big bill. Is this something that, in terms of the service that Essex County Council is providing, is this something, rather than employing a tree officer at £40,000 with all the additional costs, is that something that longer term we can now go into a shared service and a shared agreement and making sure that this is done every year, so we're keeping control of our arboreal assets?
Mr. Holmes?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects there. Obviously, there is a tree officer, and that tree officer also provides advice to town and parish councils and the council itself, and planning applications. So there's that side of the work. There's the council's parks team itself, which can do limited amounts of maintenance directly itself, and it also engages contractors. So absolutely, there's an opportunity to work in a different way going forward. We are looking at a few innovations around GIS mapping around trees, record keeping around trees, to make sure we do have that forward plan and a forward view of our tree stock. So this, is effectively going to bring us bang up to date and then going forward, we should be able to manage that on a sort of a rolling plan, and I would like that to see the expenditure rolled. And I think we have not a huge sum each year, but it's probably 30,000 plus a year for dealing with trees, if that is used on a rolling basis. But this is a backlog, effectively, which needs to be dealt with.
Actually, Mr. Holmes, if I might come in there, if we have a tree officer that we employ, why are we paying place services to oversee the work? Because surely it would be no problem for them to come out and oversee the work as it's being done within their normal duties.
Chairman, my understanding is because of the scale of the work, and if members were minded to give this budget, then obviously this would be done as quickly as possible. Now, place services are obviously part of Essex County Council. They provide that agricultural advice to the council in any case for other services. So the view is that we should be using place services to have that oversight, get this backlog dealt with, and then obviously we can look at moving forward. And it may well be our own contracted tree officer may be able to manage that going forward, but I think just because of the scale of the work now, we feel it should be separated.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, why hasn't he been managing it as part of his duties anyway? If we have a tree officer, why have we suddenly got this big backlog of work when surely it could have been dealt with within his normal duties when he's out and about, pop into it and survey each part? It's not.
Chairman, it's not the tree officer that I would suggest hasn't done this work. I would suggest that it should be carried out through the operations team of the council, and it hasn't clearly got that forward plan. I'm being completely honest, that's I think what's missing here. It needs that floor plan, we can see that now. So the tree officer does support us, he does go out, he does advise on trees. This is about a backlog and using a contractor to help us through that backlog.
Okay, okay, all right, we're going to keep this really short because we have still got quite a bit to get through the agenda. Councillor Fleming, then Councillor Fluke. It'll be really, really
Thank
quick.
you, Chairman.
All right, we'll do Councillor Fluke and then Councillor Fleming.
Sorry.
All right, Councillor Fleming again.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going back to what Mr. Holmes said about forward plan. Surely it's what the insurers say. I'm not sure what they've said to you about the trees, but I know that we're told that we have to map all of our trees, and to make sure that there is a plan to keep everyone safe. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fluke.
I don't think it's I don't think it's any secret that the council's tree consultant is non-domiciled in this country. I just wondered if Mr. Holmes, if we had somebody who was in this country, whether or not we'd be better placed to perhaps deal with some of these projects, because we have had issues, and I know Mr. Holmes is aware of them. Thank you.
Mr. Holmes.
Chairman, I would simply say that we've reached out to place services knowing they have the skills and the capability to do the large-scale survey for us. They're also able to provide the supervision of the works. So that's the reason we went to place services initially.
Okay, Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Trees should be inspected every 3 years, actually. And then you don't, build up any problems. May I ask if this work is all proposed to be done this autumn, winter, or some held over to next year, please? Thank you.
I don't have a time scale for the work. It's over 250 trees that need work. Obviously, they'll be prioritised in terms of the urgency of the work, so there'll be a programme. Once we've engaged with the place services, I'm sure that will be mapped out and be happy to share that with members so they know the order of the works that will be done.
Okay, and last speaker is Councillor Swain. So Councillor Swain, and then we'll go to the vote.
The cost involved in this is not the monitoring survey; it's in doing the work. And I think I agree with Councillor Fluker that per tree, at £400 to £500, it seems to me too high, quite expensive. And if we use place services, we rely on them to get the best quotes to do the job, and not just put it out to one contractor to do the lot.
I think that's been covered, but Mr. Holmes?
Absolutely, it will be through competition. That is our estimate. We'd obviously always try to improve the estimate, so it will be competitive bid for the actual work itself. And it may be broken into lots. I think, with the scale of works that's needed, it's probably more than one contractor, to be honest. But that's something we'd obviously look at to get best value.
Okay, right, members. So the recommendations are, little one, that a supplementary estimate of the sum of 112,000 is provided to fund the urgent tree works identified, broken down into two elements as follows. The Essex County Council place services are engaged to oversee all the works on behalf of the council at a cost of £12,000 management. On an Essex County Council Place Services costs of engaging with the contractors for the tree works at a cost of 100,000. And little 2, that a further sum of 18,000 is provided as a contingency sum to cover unexpected costs associated in undertaking the work identified in little 1 above. Members, are we all agreed with this? Are all in agreement with this? Agreed. Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 13, events and concession strategy 23 to 28 on pages 123 to 136. I'm not sure who's taking this. Is it Mr. Butcher? Okay. Okay, sorry, Mr. Johnson would like to come in first. Thank you.
Thank you. I will hand over to Mr. Butcher very briefly. I just wanted to briefly introduce the paper and sort of emphasise the importance of this strategy. We have some wonderful assets within the district that have traditionally, for numerous years, been used for events, and it's really important that we put in place this strategy that sets out how we balance the events with protecting those assets and delivering the commercial and corporate strategy. But I'll hand over to Mr. Butcher to set out in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Yeah, the Council has always welcomed and valued temporary concessions and events that support our local businesses and ensure that we've got a diverse, vibrant and cultural attractions coming to the district for our residents and visitors to enjoy. This strategy recognises our ambitions as a council and is aligned with a number of our strategies, including our commercial approach. It understands the need for environmentally sensitive development to make sure these assets are enhanced and evolved in a way so that they can be enjoyed by both the current and future generations. Historically, events within the district have always been incredibly successful, and this strategy looks to build on that success and looks to adopt a more proactive and forward-thinking approach to seek new opportunities across its estate that meet the Council's strategic objectives and offer a wide range of choice for both events and concessions within our parks and open spaces. I think this strategy will help inform the Prom Park Management Plan by giving greater clarity on what types of events and concessions and the frequency they will be permissible within our parks and open spaces. And once the strategy is adopted, a delivery plan will follow and an annual plan for any significant events of size and significant concessions will be cascaded to members via this committee. Officers will look to continue to work diligently and listen to feedback from a wide range of stakeholders during the planning process, each annual process, as we look to build trust and positive relationships throughout. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Stamp.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I actually read it and I thought it was actually really good. The only comment I would make, and I was pleased you answered it further on in the report when I was reading, bottom of page 128, and I put "and listen," because it looks very good. You read it, but you must listen to the residents as well when you get the feedback, and also if you can consult as much as you can with ward members where you're actually going to hold those events. Because it's us who get the comments all the time afterwards. I'm not saying don't do it, because I think it's really good, and thank you very much for doing it. It's about time. I don't mean that naughtily, but you know what I mean. It's really good, and I think we need to adopt it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Siddle, Councillor Swain, and then Councillor Fluke. So Councillor Siddle.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. So I would like to make an amendment to this report, and it's on page 132 on the third paragraph. And that's about exceptional circumstances. And I think the opposition leader should also be included in any discussions if there is an impromptu event that comes up, because this will secure cross-party working both now and in the future.
I'll second that.
Okay, so I'll take a vote on this now, and then before we vote on the final thing. So, Councillor, I'm going to come back to you once we've voted. So, do we all like to see this amendment added to the final recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, so we will add that into the recommendation at the end. So we'll do the recommendation with that amendment as suggested by Councillor Siddle. Okay, right. So we have got. Councillor Fluker, Councillor Lagan, who else wanted to speak? Councillor so Councillor Swain, Councillor Fluker, and then Councillor Lagan. Okay, Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I have several points. Firstly, under the aims for the concessions, I think there are two things which we should say we do not want in park. One is the use of petrol or diesel generators or engines, and to say they will not be allowed. And electronically produced music will not be allowed for concessions. This is not applied to main events, but to individual concessions, that there shouldn't be electronically reproduced music. On page 133, working with residents, I think organisations should be required to liaise with local residents, not just encouraged. And the times there are times put for operations, but nothing said about time limits on set up and set down, which we know from past events, with the big events, has gone on well into the late evening night. So I don't know how that could be phrased, but clearly there needs to be some control on the set down times. And lastly, stages for larger events should be cited with the welfare of local residents in mind.
Okay, I think I've got all those, Mr. As far as I'm aware, I think environmental health covers things like noise and generators. I don't think that's down to us to necessarily set that, but I'm sure Mr. Butcher will assist.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think with the diesel and petrol and electronic music for concessions, I think at this moment in time we'd like to review each proposition on its own merits, and I wouldn't like to discount anything at this stage. With temporary concessions such as an ice cream van, I can understand the rationale for not wanting to have diesel there, but that's a £18,000 a year contract to the council. So it's we will look at greener alternatives, but it's not something I could necessarily agree to or would want to put in place right now. I think working with local residents, whenever we have major events, we always do engage with local residents, and the onus will be on the event organiser to do that cascade of information and engage with local residents. So that is happening, and I think there needs to be a recognition, and I think I've got that in the strategy, that not everything is going to be liked by everyone, but that's an accepted risk. There will always be a handful of people who don't want or support a local event, but we do have the thousands of visitors that do come and support and enjoy those days out. The set up and take down of events and stages, yes, you're absolutely right. 2021, there was an incident. We've learned from that, and it won't be happening again. We have that written into all the terms and conditions to ensure that there will be no set up or takedown outside of certain hours.
Thank you. Okay, now
yes, just briefly, I think we do really need to try and avoid having an ice cream van there. I know it's very profitable, but it's pumping out fumes throughout the day right next to the play area, and this just doesn't seem to be acceptable these days.
I think we'll note that, and I think Mr. Butch will perhaps we can ask them if they'd consider using other matters, but I don't think anything's really come ahead yet that replaces diesel. But I think by 2030 we'll see something for certain.
Could be battery operated for the actual.
Yeah, when they're good enough that we can use them. I agree entirely. I mean, I've got an electric car, so I'm all for electric. Right, Councillor Fluker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I sort of I'm on agenda item 14, so I'll give way.
Okay, right. Before we take this to the vote, I think Councillor Lagan, that's a good wave.
I mean, of course we do. It's a good piece of work. It's just a tad premature, in my opinion. I think that what we need to do is we've got the concession paper coming up to planning, central area planning next week, I think it is. So that's going to be revisited. Now, Mr. Dodson's looking a bit strange there. So is there anything worrying? Yeah, that you want to?
I'm waiting to hear all of your comments, but this is a strategy, not a planning document. So that was what perturbed me. But I'll wait to hear what you say, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Director. because I hadn't finished. So yes, it's amazing, isn't it? Body language is a strange thing. It's a strategy, but what informs a strategy? So we need to look at a policy and plans. So plans will inform what you do with your strategy, and your strategy is your vision and how you actually achieve your plan. So I'm thinking from this, there's a couple of things. I don't think it should be thrown out at all. I think it should just be deferred until we look at the Promenade Park Management Plan, which has been debated quite considerably. If we don't, then we could be in jeopardy of not having enough information from the management plan to actually help inform the strategy to be able to go forward. And I think that Councillor Swain has actually raised a couple of really minor points. Council's declared a climate emergency. We've said in this chamber tonight we put money over the environment. £18,000 a year for an ice cream van, great. But hang on, if we have a strategy on the Prom Park management plan, part of that management plan is how we could look at actually getting concessions on there that maybe could actually generate slightly more of a revenue income for us. But we haven't done that work yet. So once we've done that work, we can link it into this document and have the strategy, and then we can actually go and launch that. Because I hear an awful lot about the visitor offer, and we need visitor pounds to come in. But we've also got to think very carefully for the local people for which the asset was left to our care as well, to the borough council. So what I think is a good piece of work. There's a lot of stuff in there. There is some real core aspects, but I think the sensible thing to do is to defer it until we get the Promenade management plan, which should come early part of 2023, and then we can link into this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't think I need comments, so I think it's been covered. Right, okay, so it now comes to, I think we'll call this to a close, and the recommendation is that the event strategy 2023-2028 Appendix 1 be approved. All those, actually, Tara, can we have... Oh, with the amendment by Councillor Siddle. Yeah, with Councillor Siddle's amendment. Right. Yes.
I had to be seconded, Madam Chairman. I'll second Councillor
Okay, yeah,
Siddle's.
Councillor Channer has seconded the proposal by Councillor Siddle. Right, would you, I take it, Councillor Lagan, you want a recorded vote? Yeah, okay. Tara, can we have a recorded vote, please?
Yes, Chairman. Members, if you could just indicate for or against or abstain, please, when I call your name. Starting with Councillor Mrs. Channer, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
For.
Councillor Fluker. Against. Councillor Lagan.
Against, please.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy.
For, but with the reservations about fumes near children.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
For.
Councillor Stapp.
Oh. Chairman.
Councillor Stapp.
Because Councillor Lagan made some really good points. Sorry, just give me a sec. I'm going to support it. For.
Councillor Swain.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
For.
Councillor White.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 8 for, 2 against and no abstentions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tara. Okay, moving on to agenda item 14, which is the Rural England Prosperity Fund, on pages 137 to 140. I've got this for Mr. Dodson, but I presume it's Miss Cable. So, Miss Cable, Mrs. Cable, or do you want to? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. If you're happy, I've got a short presentation to share with members,
Perfect.
so I'll quickly join you at the top desk.
That's right, it's safe. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. The Rural England Prosperity Fund is a rural-specific top-up to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is part of the Government's Levelling Up White Paper. Members will recall from the July committee the Council's approach to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund was agreed and the investment plan submitted by the 1st of August deadline. As advised previously in this meeting, we're still waiting the outcome of the submission, but just to confirm, it's not a competitive bid process as with the Levelling Up Fund. It is an allocation, but we still need to do the due diligence for the investment plan to be approved. The Rural England Prosperity Fund will provide capital funding for projects aimed at small businesses and community infrastructure to help improve productivity and strengthen the rural economy and communities. In essence, it will act as a capital grant fund for us to distribute to external parties via a robust application and assessment process. The fund was launched on the 3rd of September, and I'd like to advise members that we were completely unaware that this additional top-up would be forthcoming, as no reference had been made to it in any previous paperwork by the Levelling Up Fund or by the UK Shared Prosperity Fund guidance. During September and October, we've worked with rural partners and stakeholders to gather evidence to support the identification of the interventions which could be supported. And currently, we'll be refining our addendum investment plan ready for submission by the 30th of November. 25% of the fund will be allocated to year one, which is identified as 2023-2024, and the remaining 75% in year two. This has not been confirmed in the guidance, but only verbally by DEFRA on the local authority webinars attended. Officers have chased DEFRA on more than one occasion for the outstanding frequently asked questions from these webinars, but have simply been advised that they will be issued in due course. And to put it into context, those webinars were attended 7 weeks ago. Officers will utilise the Council's nominated UK Shared Prosperity Fund Partnership Group, 1 Maldon District, to develop and inform our investment plan. In addition, we have of course consulted rural stakeholders and representatives such as the Rural Community Council of Essex, National Union of Farmers, South East Local Enterprise Partnership and the Country Land and Business Association. We've also been working through our key themes which have been identified in our existing strategies to enable to target the funding appropriately. And that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, members, thank you for that, Ms Cable. Councillor Fluker.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope that we're now on the agenda items put in. Chairman, I think I'm going to have to ask, I'm going to have to declare an interest that ordinarily I would have asked for a dispensation, but I didn't actually realise the significance of this. So I'm going to declare an interest. There is no public speaking at this event, which precludes me from speaking to my own ward and my own constituents in Southminster. So, Chairman, I'm going to leave the room on the understanding that I hope a member will ask a question on my behalf. But I'm afraid this is where we are with the new code of conduct, and I can't say I specifically agree with it being applied under these circumstances. Thank you. Councillor Stampost. There's nothing sinister.
We're all now wondering what it is. Thank you, Councillor Fluker. Please note that Councillor Fluker's leaving the chamber. Right, so members, would you like to ask any questions? Yeah. Councillor Stamp?
Would you like me to read Councillor Fluke? It's nothing innocuous. I don't think I'm breaking any rules. Sorry. It just says, yesterday, Southminster Parish Council was granted planning permission for a new community centre and sports pavilion. Would officers agree to meet with Councillor Fluker, the ward member, to discuss this exciting and worthwhile community project, Madam Chair? I don't see there's an issue. Surely members would, directors would agree to meet with a ward member, or is that not allowed?
I'm sure it's allowed. I can't quite see why Councillor Fluker's left the chamber, but pass.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Give Mr Dawson, Mr Holmes.
Thank you.
Okay, do you want to call Councillor Fluker back into the chamber?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Channer?
I was going to make a comment about that, so I can't now. It's back in.
Oh, actually, Councillor Fluker, can you go outside again, please? Councillor Fluker, can you leave the chamber again, please? Because Councillor Channer would like to raise a question. Okay, Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I'd worked out what it was actually when Councillor Fluker said that, because there was at South East last night, and it's to do with the community hall and the community facilities that are being built. What I would say is, obviously, bearing in mind this is across the whole district, 430,000. I mean, there may be other schemes as well, so I would hope there might be some way that this will be, how do I put it, apportioned or whatever. I don't know when we get that money, sort of in a strata of like maximum bids possible, or however it works, or what it might be a given, because obviously you're doing the work at the moment. And therefore, I think there could be other parishes or, you know, the farmers, farming community and others that may see this. It reminds me a bit of the LEADER programme, or I think that's what it's based on, which was previous.
Yeah.
And you need, what we had to do there was sort of have equitability across it and work out to get the maximum benefit across the whole area. So that's all I would say. That's just a comment. I can see where Councillor Fluke is coming from, and that's fine. But I think there might be others as well that have ongoing projects, apart from other aspects, voluntary service, etc. Thank you.
Absolutely. I can't imagine that any one company or one idea is going to get all the funding. It's going to be shared. But I'll go to Ms Cable, who'll explain it better than I can.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Chenner. You are correct. This programme is modelled on the previous LEADER programme, which was European funding. And I'm not going to attempt to remember what LEADER stood for, because I believe it was French, and my French isn't that good. But you're correct. It is a capital grant fund. We are looking at minimum and maximum grant levels. That's to ensure that the money can benefit the community as best as possible in terms of projects that are supported. The identified funding for year one, which is 2023-2024, is just over £107,000, and the identified funding for 2024-2025 is just over £322,000. And when we talk about capital projects, they tend to be quite funding intense. So what we would like to see is a maximum grant level to ensure that spread is evenly across the district.
And I imagine there's going to be a very strict criteria for what gets funding and what doesn't. It's not going to be a yes, just directors decide. Right, okay, if we'd like to invite Councillor Fluker back in, and then I have...
Councillor Swain might be on the same thing.
Okay, hold on a minute. Councillor Swain, is yours on the same thing?
No, the issue is whether the fund would be applicable for any projects that have started or underway in any sense.
I wouldn't think so. Actually, there's got quite a lot of microphones on.
So we don't actually receive the funding until the 1st of April, and it's not been advised that this funding can be used to cover spends that have been completed in arrears. As it's a capital fund, we're going to need to be quite stringent in terms of the performance and the governance of the projects. So our understanding currently is that it cannot be used in advance of receiving it. However, as I stated, we're still waiting for those frequently asked questions from DEFRA. I'm very disappointed that those have not been provided to local authorities in the past 7 weeks, bearing in mind we have 20 days to submit this investment plan, and that has been expressed to the department.
Yeah, I'd just like to come in and say that we've been very lucky to have officers like Ms Cable who have got onto this straight away and got some funding that otherwise we wouldn't have got, because it's amazing that you turned that around in 20 days as you have with all the other fundings. Right, Councillor Channer, is it related to...
Yes, it's just something the officers just said. I mean, I'm hearing about... Sorry, Madam Chairman, I'm hearing about the delays regarding, obviously, DEFRA, and the officers made it quite clear. Very disappointed not to have the frequently asked questions, and of course bearing in mind the time frame for when this bid has to be put in, we're dealing now with a very, very short time before that bid needs to go in. Therefore, I would have a proposal, Madam Chairman, should it not be perhaps, and forgive me for putting myself forward, if perhaps with the director and the leader that we do actually make an approach to DEFRA to see if we can perhaps get these frequently asked questions or back up what the officer's done. It might just help get those out a bit quicker. On the other hand, it might not. But I was just wondering if that might be a suitable thing to propose to assist Ms Cable, who's obviously approached more than one occasion and still nothing forthcoming.
I'm sure it would be a problem to organise the meeting with directors, the leader, deputy and Ms Cable. I don't think that would be a problem, would it?
Well, I was make an approach to DEFRA, a suitable piece of correspondence to support the officers' approaches.
Okay, well, we can discuss that after the meeting. I mean, that's been proposed, so that'll depend on officers' time, but I certainly don't have a problem with it. Mr. Holmes, were you in agreement with that? Yes. Yeah, okay, right, thank you. Right, okay, Councillor Fleming, then Councillor Lagan. Oh, he can come in again now. No, I think there's no more questions relating to Councillor Fluker's statement, is there? No, right, yeah, we'll let him back in again. We've finished talking about you now, Councillor Fluker, so Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. Leander, can I just ask, can we use the money? I'm thinking about the gateway signs that we had designed, or we, as a district council, precluded from doing that? Thank you.
Councillor Fleming, we're pleased to hear that's a question I asked 5 times on the webinars that we attended, to which every time it was ignored. So that's one of the FAQs that we're waiting to have a response on, hence my disappointment, and this could greatly affect what the details within our investment plan, should that be the case.
Councillor Fleming.
If I can just come back, thanks, Leander, that's quite interesting. So maybe we could hand those designs onto another vehicle, perhaps? Another organisation, thank you.
I won't make comment on that because we'll be devising the grant scheme, so it wouldn't be fair for me to be able to comment on that, I'm afraid, Councillor Fleming.
Okay, Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Leander. It's a cracking report, and thanks for all your work you've done so far. I'm really happy with it. I think it's an excellent piece of work, great piece of initiative, and can only be of benefit as long as it's spread out with a strict criteria. The only comment that I'd make is actually a proposal to change to recommendation little 2, where it talks about and I think it's only right that it needs to be delegated, that the investment plan delegate the authority of the Director of Strategy, Performance and Governance in consultation with the Leader of the Council, Chairman of Strategy and Resources. I think it also should be the Leader of the Opposition, because that brings in another view and has a balance to it, but without getting Uncle Tom Cobley and everyone involved in it. But you've got to keep it small, it's got to be nimble, it's got to be quick. So that's a recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, members, are we in agreement with that amendment?
Yes.
Okay, right. So, right, we'll put it to the. Everybody else has asked questions, so we'll put it to the vote now. We've got recommendation little 1, that members note the opportunity presented for investment in the district by the Rural England Support Fund and the council's role in securing the investment and any administration. On little 2, that members note the aggressive pace of work required to submit the Council's Rural England Prosperity Fund Addendum Investment Plan and delegate the authority to the Director of Strategy, Performance and Governance in consultation with the Leader of the Council and Chairman of Strategy Resources Committee for development and submission in line with the government guidance. Members will be provided with a further written update, and that's also to include the amendment made by Councillor Lagan and seconded by Councillor Siddle, that this will also include the Leader of the Opposition. Is everybody in agreement with these 2 recommendations? Okay, well done, members. Okay, and moving on to agenda item 15. Thank you, Ms Cable. Soft plastics recycling trial, plastic bags and wrappings, pages 141 and 144. Okay, and sorry, it's Mr Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is an exciting project to help support our climate change strategy and to help manage waste and disposal of waste and recycling from the district. You'll see from the report itself that our waste contractor sewers have been engaging with this particular project and is taking part in a scheme that we actually start to test how this type of material is collected and recycled. A quarter of the waste that is produced is actually plastics, but only 6% of that is recyclable. So the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs are actually working on this to see if they can improve that. And it may well become a requirement for all local authorities to collect this in a different way by March 2027. So 3 local authorities have been selected for the first phase, and we are one of those authorities. So the scheme will be run entirely by sewers themselves. They will make the necessary arrangements for the collection and obviously the recycling of the materials collected. The recommendations before you tonight, 1 are to inform you of the success and that this trial going forward, and obviously is to ensure that we actually promote this with the public and be very clear on what is required from the public. Initially, it will be about 25% of the district, and obviously that information, once we understand which parts of the district are going to be involved in that will be shared with members, particularly Wareham Ward members, for information. So I think it's a very positive report. It helps us to meet our recycling targets, and we benefit from the early learning of the scheme. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to say that I'm really pleased that we're involved in this. I think it's important that we can recycle as much as we can. So I think the fact we've been asked to be one of the pilot authorities, I think is a really good pat on the back for our waste team. Right, okay, I'll go to members. So I've got Councillor Lagan and Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, Councillor, I have a question to Mr Holmes. How did we get selected as one of the three?
Chairman, I think that was done through Suez, so I think they actually looked at all of their contracts and put through what they thought were the most suitable. So I think that's how it arose through the contractor themselves.
Thank you, and just to say, what a brilliant thing. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Stamp, and then Councillor Thompson.
Mine is the normal, Madam Chair, where, what area, Maldon, no doubt. So hopefully it won't be. Hopefully it will actually come out to the Dengie or to Burnham-on-Crouch to do this or wherever, and not just Maldon centric, please. Thank you.
Chairman, I will obviously report back if I can hear the views of members, and I can obviously share that through the waste team back to Suez, but I'll have to share with you their best thoughts when they come back with that.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker? And then Councillor Thompson. To Councillor Fluker first.
I'll give way if you want. Yeah.
No, I'll do first.
Chairman, I just wanted to ask Mr Holmes, bearing in mind that we have a very, very good independent recycling company in Maldon district, in Maldon to be precise, and that members visited the site not long ago. Can you reassure members that even though we're contractually bound by Essex County Council, that they are encouraged to engage with that company? Because to me it makes a huge amount of sense if we can recycle our waste within the district rather than taking it out. But I do understand there are contractual obligations, but I would have thought it would have been in everybody's interest, including Suez, to go there. And it was a very worthwhile trip, I must admit, if somewhat smelly.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
I'll pass, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, members, do we agree this? Note it? Yeah, thank you. Right, okay, now we move on to agenda item 16, and this is split into two parts, A and B, and 16A is the half-yearly Treasury Management update by Mr Leslie, and this is just for noting, it's purely for noting. So, Mr Leslie?
As it's for noting, I wasn't planning on speaking.
Okay, that's fine,
same for the next one as well.
And, okay, and the same with 16B, noted? Okay, because we've all had these reports to read. Okay, agenda item 17. Any other items of business that the chairman of the committee decides are urgent? Unfortunately, yes, there is one. Is that coming now, or is that added into one of the investments, the boys?
So, Chair, no, that won't need
okay,
to
that's
come
fine.
to this meeting.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that's good.
Fine.
Fantastic. Right, okay, there are none then. No business that's urgent. Right, agenda item 18, exclusion of the public and press. To resolve that under section 100A part 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as designed in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act, and that this satisfies the public interest test. All agreed? Okay, Tara, can we turn off the live feed now, please?